The courtroom was silent, so quiet I could hear the second hand ticking on the judge's wall clock. Rachel Monroe, my daughter-in-law, stood confidently by her lawyer, arms crossed, smug smile tugging at her lips as she whispered something into Eric's ear. He didn't even look at me. They thought it was over, that I'd been reduced to nothing more than a burden, that my pension, my presence, and my entire life's value had been sealed away the day they found the hidden safe in my late wife's closet. Rachel had screamed with joy when she'd cracked it open, thinking it held a fortune she could finally claim. And when they tossed me out of my own house, telling me that your military pension doesn't even cover dog food these days, I didn't fight. I just packed my things. Quiet. Dignified. Because I knew something they didn't. And when the judge cleared his throat, opening the sealed will my wife and I had left behind, updated just 2 years before her passing, I saw Rachel's lips freeze mid-smirk. The entirety of the estate, including the property at 421 Birchwood Lane, the safe and its contents, the investment accounts, and personal effects, are bequeathed in full to... He paused. I already knew the name. Leonard Carter, sole and exclusive heir. Rachel's face turned the color of raw dough, and in that moment, that perfect, icy moment, I knew justice had arrived. I wasn't always this man sitting silently in court, watching vultures devour each other with silver forks. Once I was a husband, a father, a decorated Navy veteran who spent 30 years of his life serving this country. My wife, Eleanor, was the rock of our home, graceful, wise, and endlessly loyal. We built our life together in Brookside, a quiet Indiana town where every house had shutters and every neighbor knew your dog's name. We raised Eric there, our only child, in a modest paid-off home surrounded by hydrangeas Eleanor adored. "Len," she'd say, pruning those blue blooms in the golden hour light, "we don't need much to be happy, do we?" And we didn't. Our happiness came from Saturday morning pancakes, from teaching Eric to ride a bike on the driveway, from dancing in the kitchen to Sinatra when we thought no one was watching. The first sign that everything would change came during our 40th anniversary dinner. We'd invited Eric and Rachel, hoping to celebrate 4 decades of marriage with the people we loved most. "Dad," Eric said, pushing his barely touched salmon around his plate, "have you and Mom considered what happens when you can't take care of yourselves anymore?" Eleanor's fork paused halfway to her mouth. I remember the slight tremble in her hand. "We're healthy as horses," I replied with a forced chuckle. "Doctor says I've got the heart of a man, 20 years younger." Rachel leaned forward, her diamond earrings catching the restaurant's dim light. "Leonard, you're 72. Eleanor's health isn't what it used to be. We're just thinking practically." Eleanor reached under the table and squeezed my hand. Later that night, she whispered, "They've been asking about the house, Len, about our finances." 6 months later, Eleanor was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctor's words hit like artillery fire. 6 months, maybe less. I'm sorry. She lasted 4. 4 months of watching her shrink beneath hospital sheets, her vibrant spirit dimming with each sunset. We had conversations in those quiet hospital nights that I'll carry to my grave. Promises made, secrets shared, a lifetime distilled into whispers, between morphine doses. "Len," she said one night, her voice so thin I had to lean close to hear it, "promise me you'll update the will. Everything in your name. Not joint, not Eric's, yours." "Ellie, that's not necessary. Eric's a good boy." Her grip on my wrist was startlingly strong. "Eric is. Rachel isn't. Promise me." I promised. 2 weeks before Eleanor slipped away, we signed the papers in her hospital room. Our lawyer, Thomas Whitney, an old Navy buddy of mine, watched us with sad eyes as we transferred everything into my name alone. "I hate this part of the job," Tom said afterward, patting my shoulder, "but Eleanor's right to protect you." When she passed, it was a Wednesday morning. The hospice nurse had stepped out for coffee. I was holding Eleanor's hand, telling her about the hydrangeas blooming early that year, when she simply stopped breathing mid-smile. The funeral was elegant and understated, just as she would have wanted. Eric sobbed openly. Rachel dabbed at dry eyes with a black handkerchief. Afterward, at the reception in our home, I overheard her in the kitchen on her phone. "Yes, we'll put it on the market as soon as possible. The old man can't possibly maintain it alone." That night, after everyone had gone, I sat on our back porch swing, Eleanor's cardigan wrapped around my shoulders despite the summer heat, and let myself break apart for the first and last time. When morning came, I packed away my grief like an old uniform. There would be time for that later. Now, I had a promise to keep. Eric and Rachel showed up the following Sunday with takeout and determination. Dad, Eric said, arranging containers of kung pao chicken on the dining table Eleanor had lovingly polished every month for 40 years. We've been talking. You shouldn't be alone in this big house. Rachel nodded, not looking up from her phone. It's too much maintenance for someone your age. Our guest room is all ready for you. I stared at my son. This man I'd taught to throw a baseball and knot a tie, wondering when he'd become a stranger. I'm perfectly capable of living in my own home, Eric. Of course you are, Rachel chimed in with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. But wouldn't it be nice to have company? To see the grandkids every day? To not worry about repairs and yard work? 3 weeks of this. 3 weeks of daily visits. Of concerned. Looks of accidental mentions of seniors who'd fallen and lain undiscovered for days. 3 weeks of subtle psychological warfare until, exhausted from grief and pressure, I relented. Just temporarily, I insisted, packing only 2 suitcases. Until I find my footing. Rachel beamed. Of course, Leonard. And meanwhile, we'll just maintain the house. Keep it aired out. Within a month, they'd emptied it. Furniture sold. Photos boxed away. Eleanor's clothes donated without asking which pieces I might have wanted to keep. I said nothing, swallowing my protests like bitter pills. This was my son, after all. My blood. Their house in the new development across town was all chrome and glass, with rooms so open you could feel exposed even when alone. They gave me the downstairs guest room. Not quite the basement, but close enough. My 2 suitcases looked pitiful in the walk-in closet designed for a wardrobe 10 times that size. The first month wasn't terrible. I read books to my grandchildren, 7-year-old Maddie and 5-year-old Ben. I tried to stay out of the way. I offered to cook occasionally, though Rachel usually declined, citing my outdated recipes. Then gradually, the requests began. Dad, could you pick up the kids from school? Rachel has a spa appointment. Leonard, the fence in the backyard is looking shabby. Do you think you could repaint it while we're at work? Grandpa, Mommy says you're taking us to soccer today. I didn't mind, not really. Being useful felt good, but the requests turned into expectations, and the expectations into demands. The turning point came on a rainy Tuesday, 3 months after I'd moved in. Rachel handed me an envelope over breakfast. What's this? I asked, opening it to find a neatly typed spreadsheet. Just your portion of the monthly expenses, she said casually, sipping her protein shake. Utilities, groceries, your share of the mortgage since you're occupying space. I stared at the bottom line. $1,200, almost. Every cent of my pension. Rachel, I'm on a fixed income. She raised one perfectly shaped eyebrow. And we're on a budget, Leonard. Everyone contributes in this household. It's only fair. I looked to Eric, who suddenly found his coffee fascinating. Son? He cleared his throat. Dad, we're not asking for anything unreasonable. You're using utilities, eating food. You have to understand our position. I paid it. Every month. Without complaint. I sold my watch, a retirement gift from the Navy, to cover the first installment. I canceled my subscriptions, stopped buying the occasional cigar, cut corners wherever I could. And still, it wasn't enough. Not for Rachel. Your father's becoming a liability, I overheard her telling Eric one night. He's slow with the kids. He can't even handle basic tech, and his pension barely covers his expenses. We need to consider other options. Like what? Eric asked, his voice tired. Brookside Pines has openings, senior living. They'd take care of everything, and we could finally convert that room into the home gym we've been wanting. I stood in the hallway, frozen. Eleanor's wedding ring clutched in my pocket like a talisman. It was the only piece of her they hadn't managed to take from me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake thinking of Eleanor, of promises made, of the man I'd been and the shadow I'd become. For the first time since her death, I felt a spark ignite within me. Not grief, not resignation, but quiet, burning resolve. They had no idea what was coming. The morning after I overheard their conversation about Brookside Pines, I maintained my usual routine. I made coffee, read the newspaper at the kitchen island, and pretended I hadn't heard my own son planning to discard me like outdated furniture. Morning, Leonard, Rachel chirped, entering the kitchen in her designer workout clothes. I've made a list of errands for you today. Maddie needs cupcakes for her class party, the dry cleaning needs picking up, and the gardener canceled so the lawn needs mowing. I folded my newspaper calmly. I'll take care of it. She paused, perhaps surprised by my lack of resistance. Great. Oh, and we're having the Richardsons over for dinner tonight. Could you make yourself scarce? Maybe visit your friend Tom? The dining room only seats 6 comfortably. The dining room could seat 8. I'd helped them. By the table. Of course, I replied, voice steady. I'll be out of your way. That afternoon, while Rachel was at her Pilates class and Eric at work, I decided to retrieve a photo album of Eleanor and me that I'd stored in one of the boxes they'd hastily packed from our home. Those boxes had been relegated to a corner of their basement, gathering dust like the memories they contained. I found the album easily enough, tucked between Eleanor's old recipe books and my service medals. As I pulled it out, I noticed something had shifted in the box behind it. A small, ornate wooden box I recognized immediately. Eleanor's keepsake box, where she stored birthday cards, ticket stubs, and the occasional love note I'd hidden in her purse over the years. I hadn't seen it since the move. Sitting on an overturned plastic bin, I opened it carefully, running my fingers over the contents like a blind man reading Braille. Each item was a moment, a fragment of our life together. At the bottom, beneath a pressed corsage from our anniversary, I found an envelope addressed to me in Eleanor's elegant handwriting. For Len, open when needed most. My hands trembled as I broke the seal. Inside was a letter and a small key. My dearest Leonard, it began. If you're reading this, I'm gone, and you found yourself in need of guidance. I've watched Rachel's influence over Eric grow stronger over the years, and I fear what may happen when I'm no longer there to protect you from her ambitions. There's a safe in our bedroom closet, behind the panel where I kept my winter sweaters. This key opens the lockbox inside the safe, which contains copies of all our legal documents, including the updated will we signed. Keep these safe, my love. They're your shield when I can no longer be. Remember your promise. Remember your worth. Remember us. All my love, Eleanor. I pressed the letter to my chest, feeling her presence wash over me like a warm tide. My Eleanor, still protecting me, even now. That evening, I called Tom from a gas station payphone, unwilling to risk being overheard on Rachel's smart home system. They're planning to put me in a home, Tom, I said without preamble. Tom's voice was a grounding force. Have they found the safe yet? No, it's still at the house, as far as I know. They've been too busy selling everything else to notice it. Good. Keep it that way. And, Len, start documenting everything. Every penny they take, every conversation about getting rid of you. We might need it. 2 days later, Rachel announced she and Eric would be spending the weekend refreshing my old house, preparing it for potential buyers. We've had a few nibbles, she said over breakfast, but it needs updating. No one wants that 1980s kitchen anymore. I nodded, keeping my face neutral. Smart move. The moment their SUV pulled out of the driveway, I called a taxi. I needed to get to the house before they started tearing into walls. But I was too late. I arrived to find the front door ajar, sounds of excited voices echoing through the half-empty rooms. Following the noise, I found Rachel and Eric in my bedroom, surrounded by scattered sweaters and tools. Rachel's face was flushed with excitement. Leonard, perfect timing. You'll never believe what we found. Behind her, set into the closet wall where Eleanor's sweaters once hung, was an exposed safe, the one Eleanor had mentioned in her letter. A hidden safe! Can you believe it? Was this Eleanor's idea? What's the combination? Rachel's words tumbled out like water from a broken dam. I shrugged, affecting confusion. I had no idea that was there. Eric studied my face. Dad, come on. You lived here for 40 years. Your mother had her secrets, I said simply. I respected her privacy. Rachel was already on her phone. I'm calling a locksmith. We need to get this open right away. I stayed silent, watching them circle the safe like vultures over a dying animal. I knew what they would find and what they wouldn't. The documents Eleanor mentioned would be in the lockbox inside, which required the key now burning a hole in my pocket. The locksmith arrived within the hour, a young man with tattoos peeking from beneath his rolled sleeves. He made quick work of the combination lock. There you go, folks, he said, swinging the door open. Whatever treasure you're hunting is all yours. Inside were stacks of documents, several bundles of cash, and a small metal lockbox, exactly as Eleanor had described. Rachel's eyes widened. Oh my God, she whispered, pulling out the cash and counting rapidly. There's at least 10,000 here. Eric was leafing through the documents. Investment accounts, property deeds, Mom's jewelry appraisals. Rachel turned to me, her, expression a nauseating mix of triumph and calculated concern. Leonard, this changes everything. With these assets, you could afford the best care at Brookside Pines. You wouldn't have to worry about being a burden anymore. The word burden hit like a slap, but I maintained my composure. That's thoughtful of you, Rachel. She barely heard me, already taking photos of the documents with her phone. We'll need to get these to our financial advisor right away. Figure out the best way to liquidate everything. Liquidate? I echoed. For your care, Dad, Eric added quickly, not meeting my eyes. This is a good thing. Mom was looking out for you. She certainly was, I thought, watching them inventory my life like auctioneers. They were so preoccupied with the visible contents that they barely noticed the lockbox. When Rachel finally picked it up, she shook it dismissively. Locked. Probably just old photos or something. We can deal with this later. That night, back at their house, Rachel didn't even wait until dinner was cleared to deliver her verdict. Leonard, she began, her voice dripping with practiced sympathy. Eric and I have been talking, with what we found. Today, there's no reason for you to continue struggling here with us. Struggling, I repeated. You know what I mean. The stairs are hard on your knees. The kids are noisy. And now you can afford Brookside Pines. It's perfect timing. Eric at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. Dad, we just want what's best for you. Those independent living apartments are really nice. Rachel nodded, eagerly. They have bingo nights. I looked between them. My son who couldn't meet my gaze, and the woman who'd poisoned his heart against me. In that moment, I made my decision. How soon would I need to leave? I asked quietly. Rachel's smile widened. Well, we've actually already spoken to them. They have an opening next week. Isn't that lucky? 3 days. They were giving me 3 days. Before discarding me. I nodded slowly. I see. Well, I should start packing then. That's the spirit, Rachel said, patting my hand condescendingly. And don't worry about all those financial documents and investments. We'll handle everything. I'm sure you will, I thought, my hand closing around the key in my pocket. I didn't need 3 days. I packed my belongings in one, what little I had. Left that meant anything to me. My service medals, the photo album, Eleanor's cardigan, the letter, the key. Rachel seemed almost disappointed by my cooperation, perhaps having anticipated resistance she could label as confusion or stubbornness. Instead, I moved with quiet efficiency, saying little, observing everything. On my second day, while they were both at work, I called Tom. They found the safe, I told him. They're sending me to Brookside Pines in 2 days. Tom's curse was colorful and creative. You're not going to that place, Len. Pack your bags. You're staying with me until we sort this out. That's not necessary. The hell it isn't. My spare room isn't fancy, but it's yours for as long as you need it. And I've still got those legal contacts from when I handled my brother's estate. We're going to fight this. That evening, when Rachel and Eric returned home, I was sitting calmly in the living room with my suitcase beside me. Leonard? Rachel's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose in surprise. Are you going somewhere? Yes, I said simply. I'm leaving tonight. Eric stepped forward, concern finally breaking through his detachment. Dad, we haven't finalized arrangements with Brookside yet. There's no rush. I'm not going to Brookside, I replied, my voice steady. I'm staying with Tom for a while. Rachel's smile tightened. Tom Jacobs? Your old Navy friend? Leonard, be reasonable. He lives above that dirty mechanic shop. That's not suitable for someone in your condition. My condition is just fine, Rachel, and I've made my decision. Eric, I exchanged a glance with his wife. Dad, we found significant assets today. You can afford much better than Tom's spare room. Those assets, I said carefully, aren't accessible yet, and I won't be a burden on either of you any longer. Rachel recovered quickly, her smile returning. Well, if that's what you want, we can still help manage those investments and accounts. In fact, I've already called a financial advisor to... That won't be necessary, I interrupted. I'll handle my own affairs. The silence that followed was charged with unspoken tension. Tom is picking me up in 20 minutes, I continued. I've left my key on the counter, and I've written down the items from my house that I'd like to keep, should you decide to sell it. Eric looked stricken. Dad, this is crazy. You're acting like we're trying to rob you or something? I looked my son directly in the eyes for the first time in months. Aren't you? Before he could answer, headlights swept across the living room as Tom's truck pulled into the driveway. That's my ride, I said, standing and grasping my suitcase. Rachel blocked my path. Leonard, I think you're confused. Maybe we should call Dr. Myers. This behavior isn't like you. I'm not confused, Rachel. I'm finally seeing clearly. Tom's knock at the door ended further discussion. Eric opened it, finding himself face to face with my oldest friend, a barrel-chested man with arms corded from decades of mechanical work. Evening, Eric, Tom said coolly. I'm here for Len. Tom, this is ridiculous, Rachel interjected. Leonard needs proper care, not a room above a garage. Tom's weathered face remained impassive. Ma'am, with all due respect, what Leonard needs isn't for you to decide. He turned to me. Ready, Len? I nodded, moving past Rachel toward the door. At the threshold, I paused and turned back to my son. Eric, your mother would be disappointed, I said softly. The only rebuke I would allow myself. The drive to Tom's place was quiet. His apartment above the mechanic shop was small but clean, smelling of motor oil and the coffee he brewed by the gallon. The spare room had a twin bed, a dresser, and a window overlooking the street. It's not much, Tom apologized. It's perfect, I replied, meaning it. That night, sitting at Tom's kitchen table, I finally opened the lockbox with Eleanor's key. Inside were exactly what she'd promised. Copies of our updated will, power of attorney documents, property deeds, all naming me as sole owner and beneficiary. And there was one more thing, a sealed envelope labeled, for the lawyer. What now? Tom asked, eyeing the documents. I closed the lockbox carefully. Now we call Thomas Whitney. Whitney arrived the next morning, his tailored suit incongruous in Tom's modest apartment. He reviewed the documents with professional efficiency, his expression growing increasingly satisfied. They haven't filed anything with the court yet, he confirmed. Legally, they have no claim to any of these assets. The house, the investments, the safe contents, it's all yours, Leonard, just as Eleanor intended. They think otherwise, I said. Whitney's smile was sharp. Then, they're in for a surprise. I'll file these immediately and request an emergency hearing. Given the circumstances, we should be able to get before Judge Ralston by next week. And the envelope? I asked, sliding Eleanor's final message across the table. Whitney opened it, read the contents, and let out a low whistle. This changes everything. Eleanor was more thorough than I gave her credit for. What does it say? Tom asked. Evidence, Whitney replied. Bank statements showing irregular withdrawals from their joint accounts. Notes about Rachel pressuring Eleanor to change her will while she was on pain medication. Even a recording, apparently. He held up a small USB drive. I closed my eyes briefly, imagining Eleanor in her hospital bed, quietly gathering ammunition to protect me after. She was gone. My brave, brilliant wife. Will it be enough? I asked. Whitney nodded firmly. More than enough. Leonard, they won't know what hit them. The week following my departure from Eric and Rachel's house passed in a blur of legal preparations. Whitney worked tirelessly, filing motions, gathering additional evidence, and securing our court date with Judge Ralston, a stern by-the-books jurist known for his intolerance of family exploitation. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed constantly with messages from Eric, each more desperate than the last. Dad, please call me back. We're worried about you. Dad, Rachel didn't mean to upset you. We just want what's best. Dad, we need to discuss the assets in Mom's safe. Our financial advisor says they're substantial. I responded to none of them. Rachel tried a different approach, leaving voicemails dripping with artificial concern. Leonard, we're considering filing a wellness check if you don't respond. This behavior is concerning, especially given your age. The thinly veiled threat wasn't lost on me. I had Whitney call them directly. Mr. and Mrs. Monroe, he informed them in his crisp, professional tone. My client, Leonard Carter, is perfectly well and of sound mind. Any attempt to suggest otherwise could be construed as elder abuse, which I'm sure you'd prefer to avoid. Mr. Carter will be in touch regarding his assets after our court date next Tuesday. That silenced them, temporarily. 3 days before our hearing, Tom and I were having coffee at his kitchen table when he nodded toward the window. You've got, visitors. Eric's SUV was parked at the curb, both he and Rachel emerging in what I recognized as their business casual attire, the outfits they wore to parent-teacher conferences and homeowner association meetings. Should I send them packing? Tom asked, his expression suggesting he'd enjoy nothing more. I shook my head. No, let's hear what they have to say. Their knock was tentative. Tom. opened the door without a word, stepping aside to reveal me sitting calmly at the table, hands wrapped around my coffee mug. "Dad," Eric breathed, relief evident in his voice. "Thank God you're okay." "Why wouldn't I be?" I asked mildly. Rachel pushed past him, her eyes scanning the modest apartment with poorly disguised disdain. "Leonard, this place is, well, it's certainly not what you're accustomed to." "It suits me fine," I replied. "Tom's been a good friend." "We've been so worried," she continued, perching delicately on the edge of a chair as though afraid it might soil her designer pants. "Running off like that, not answering calls. It's not like you." "What can I help you with?" I asked, ignoring her pretense of concern. Eric exchanged a glance with Rachel before speaking. "Dad, we got a call from some lawyer. Whitney, he mentioned a court date. What's going on?" "I'm protecting my interests," I said simply. Rachel leaned forward, her voice softening into the tone one might use with a confused child. "Leonard, there's no need for lawyers. We're family. We only want to help manage those assets we found, for your benefit." I took a slow sip of coffee. "Is that why you were planning to sell my house without my permission?" Eric had the grace to look ashamed. "Dad, that was just talk. We thought downsizing might be easier for you." "And the $10,000 from the safe?" I asked. "The one Rachel was counting before you'd even closed the safe door?" Rachel's smile froze. I was just inventorying what was there. For your records." Tom snorted, from his position by the door, earning a glare from Rachel. "Look," Eric said, clearly trying to regain control of the conversation. "Obviously, there's been a misunderstanding. Why don't you come back home with us? We can sort this out as a family." "Your mother left very clear instructions," I replied. "There's no misunderstanding." Rachel's composure slipped slightly. "Instructions? What instructions?" I met her gaze steadily. "You'll find out on Tuesday." "This is ridiculous," she snapped, mask falling away. "We've done nothing but take care of you, and this is how you repay us? By hiding in this garage with some mechanic and making vague threats?" Tom straightened, but I held up a hand to stop him. "Rachel," I said quietly, "I think you should leave now." "Not without resolving this," she insisted. "Whatever you think you're doing, it won't work. Those assets are part of the family estate. Eric is entitled to his inheritance." "Eleanor's will says otherwise," I replied. Her eyes narrowed. "Wills can be contested, especially when there's evidence of undue influence. You were hardly in a position to pressure a dying woman, weren't you, Leonard?" The threat hung. In the air, like smoke. I felt a cold anger settle in my chest, but kept my voice even. "Tuesday, Judge Ralston's courtroom, 10 a.m. Eric looked between us, confusion evident. "Rachel, what are you talking about?" She ignored him, eyes locked on mine. "This isn't over, Leonard." "No," I agreed. "It isn't." After they left, Tom let out a long, low whistle. "That woman's a piece of work." "She's scared," I said, surprised to find my hands steady despite the confrontation. "And she should be." That evening, Whitney called with news. The court clerk informed me that Rachel has retained counsel, Stanton Davis. "Is that bad?" I asked. "He's aggressive but predictable, specializes in contesting wills, usually on grounds of diminished capacity or undue influence." Whitney's voice remained confident. "But don't worry. Eleanor's documentation is bulletproof, and Judge Ralston has seen every trick in the book." The weekend crept by with excruciating slowness. I spent most of it sitting on Tom's small balcony, watching mechanics work below, thinking about Eleanor, about Eric, about the life I'd built and lost and might reclaim. On Monday night, unable to sleep, I found myself at Tom's, kitchen table at 3 a.m, staring at Eleanor's wedding ring in the dim light from the microwave clock. Tom found me there an hour later, shuffling in for his pre-dawn coffee. "Second thoughts?" he asked, spooning grounds into the filter. "No," I replied. "Just remembering." He nodded, understanding without needing details. "Get dressed in your best, Len. Today's the day we remind them who you are." I donned my navy dress uniform, still crisp despite decades in storage. The brass buttons gleamed in the morning light, medals and ribbons precisely aligned, honors earned through service, sacrifice, and duty. Looking in the mirror, I saw not the diminished man Rachel had convinced me I was, but Lieutenant Commander Leonard Carter, USN retired, a man of honor, a man of his word, a man who keeps his promises. Tom drove us to the courthouse in his freshly washed truck, Whitney meeting us at the entrance in a tailored suit, briefcase in hand. "Ready?" he asked. I straightened my shoulders, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility settling upon them. "Ready?" Brookside County Courthouse stood like a sentinel in the town square, its limestone facade weathered by a century of Indiana seasons. Inside, the polished wood and hushed voices created an atmosphere of somber authority, a fitting stage for what was about to unfold. Whitney led us to courtroom 3, his confident stride drawing curious glances from clerks and lawyers who recognized my Navy uniform. Outside the courtroom doors, he paused. "Remember," he said quietly, "stay calm, no matter what they say. Judge. Ralston values dignity above all else." I nodded, my hand brushing the inner pocket where Eleanor's letter rested against my heart. The courtroom was surprisingly full. Word had spread through Brookside's gossip network, a small-town tradition as reliable as Sunday church bells. I recognized neighbors, former colleagues, even Eleanor's bridge club ladies in the back row. Their presence was unexpected, but fortifying. Rachel and Eric sat at the table opposite ours, heads bent in discussion with their attorney. A sharp-featured man I assumed was Stanton Davis. Rachel wore a conservative navy dress that screamed, "respectable daughter-in-law," her hair pulled back in a modest chignon. Eric looked uncomfortable in his suit, his eyes darting nervously around the room, settling briefly on me before skittering away. "All rise," the bailiff called, the Honorable Judge Michael Ralston presiding. Judge Ralston entered, a tall man with silver hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to absorb every detail of the room. He nodded for us to be seated, arranged his papers, and peered over his reading glasses. "Matter of Carter Estate," he announced. "I understand we have some disagreement over asset distribution and will validity. Mr. Whitney, as you filed the motion, please begin." Whitney rose smoothly. "Your Honor, this is a straightforward case. My client, Lieutenant Commander Leonard Carter, is the sole legal owner and beneficiary of all assets in question, as clearly stipulated in his late wife's will, which was properly executed and witnessed 2 years prior to her death." He approached the bench, presenting copies of the will and property deeds. "Furthermore, Your Honor, Mrs. Eleanor Carter left explicit documentation regarding her wishes and concerns about potential attempts to circumvent them." Davis was on his feet immediately. "Objection, Your Honor. Counsel is introducing hearsay evidence." "This isn't hearsay, Your Honor," Whitney countered. "These are written statements from the deceased, properly notarized and witnessed, expressing concerns about potential undue influence from her daughter-in-law." Judge Ralston accepted the documents, reading silently for several moments while the courtroom held its breath. Finally, he looked up. "I'll allow it. Please continue, Mr. Whitney." For the next 30 minutes, Whitney methodically outlined our case. The updated will, Eleanor's documented concerns, the suspicious timing of Rachel's discovery of the safe, their immediate attempts to liquidate assets, and their efforts to place me in assisted living against my wishes. Throughout his presentation, I watched Rachel's face. Her composure remained intact, but her knuckles whitened as she gripped her pen with increasing force. When Whitney mentioned the recording Eleanor had left, Rachel's pen snapped in half. "Your Honor," Whitney said, holding up the USB drive, "Mrs. Carter recorded several conversations prior to her death, during which Mrs. Rachel Monroe can be heard pressuring her to change her will while she was under heavy medication." "Objection," Davis nearly shouted. "This recording, if it exists, was obtained without my client's knowledge or consent." Judge Ralston raised an eyebrow. "Indiana is a one-party consent state, Mr. Davis. If Mrs. Carter was a participant in the conversation, the recording is admissible." Whitney connected the drive to the courtroom's audio system, and Eleanor's voice filled the room, weak but determined. "Rachel, I've told you, the house stays with Len. He built it with his own hands." Rachel's recorded voice was impatient. "Eleanor, be reasonable. Leonard can't maintain that place alone. It makes more financial sense to sell it and use the money for his care." "His care? He's perfectly capable. For now, sure. But you and I both know that won't last. Men his age decline quickly after losing their wives. It happens all the time." My hands clenched in my lap as the conversation continued, revealing Rachel's thinly veiled eagerness to access our assets, her dismissal of my capabilities, her manipulation of Eleanor during her final vulnerable days. When the recording ended, the courtroom was silent. Eric stared at his wife in shock. Rachel's face had drained of color. Judge Ralston removed his glasses, polishing them deliberately before addressing Davis. "Counselor, I believe it's your turn." Davis rose, visibly rattled but attempting recovery. "Your Honor, while these recordings may sound concerning when taken out of context, they represent nothing more than a daughter-in-law's legitimate concern for an elderly relative's future well-being." He launched into a defense focusing on Rachel and Eric's selfless decision to take me in, the burden of care they had allegedly shouldered, and their desire to properly manage the newly discovered assets for my benefit. "Furthermore," he continued, gaining confidence, "we have concerns about Lieutenant Commander Carter's capacity to manage these substantial assets at his advanced age, particularly given signs of confusion and erratic behavior, including his sudden departure from his son's home to live above a mechanic's garage." I felt Tom stiffen beside me, but kept my own expression neutral. "Mr. Carter has exhibited concerning decision-making patterns," Davis concluded, "which suggest the need for family oversight of these assets." Judge Ralston turned to me directly. "Lieutenant Commander Carter, would you like to address these concerns about your capacity?" I stood, straightened my uniform jacket, and faced the judge. "Your Honor, I served this country for 30 years, commanding men in situations where confusion meant death. I've managed my household finances without issue for 50 years. I've never missed a bill payment, tax filing, or mortgage installment." I gestured to my uniform. "The Navy taught me discipline, honor, and duty. My wife taught me love, loyalty, and foresight. Between those lessons, I've learned to recognize when someone is trying to take advantage of me." Turning slightly toward Rachel and Eric, I continued. "I don't claim perfect memory or health at 72, but I know right from wrong. I know when I'm being valued and when I'm being exploited. And I know what Eleanor wanted, what we both wanted, for the life we built together." Judge Ralston nodded thoughtfully. "Thank you, Commander. Please be seated." After brief rebuttals from both attorneys, the judge announced he would review the evidence in chambers before making his ruling. "Court will reconvene in 1 hour." As we filed out into the hallway, Eric approached me hesitantly, his eyes red-rimmed. "Dad, I didn't know about the recordings, about what Rachel said to Mom." I looked at my son, this stranger wearing my child's face. "What did you think was happening, Eric?" He flinched. I thought we were helping you. By charging me for living in your house? By selling my possessions without permission? By planning to dump me in Brookside Pines?" "It wasn't like that," he protested weakly. "It was exactly like that," I replied, feeling not anger, but a profound sadness. "Your mother saw it coming. That's why she protected me, because you wouldn't." Before he could respond, the bailiff called us back into the courtroom. Judge Ralston had returned, his expression grave. "Having reviewed the evidence," he began, "I find no reason to question the validity of Eleanor Carter's will or Lieutenant Commander Carter's capacity to manage his own affairs. The assets in question, including the property at 421 Birchwood Lane, the contents of the safe, all investment accounts, and personal effects, are hereby confirmed as the sole property of Leonard Carter, as stipulated in the will." Rachel's face contorted with disbelief. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "given the evidence of attempted financial exploitation, I am issuing a protective order, preventing Rachel and Eric Monroe from accessing any of these assets or making financial decisions on Leonard Carter's behalf." He fixed them with a stern gaze. "Consider yourselves fortunate that Lieutenant Commander Carter has not pressed elder abuse charges, which the evidence would certainly support." The gavel fell with a decisive crack, echoing through the stunned courtroom. Court adjourned. The courtroom emptied slowly, people lingering to witness the aftermath of Judge Ralston's ruling. Rachel stormed out immediately, her heels striking the marble floor like angry exclamation points. Eric hesitated, looking back at me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher, before following his wife. Whitney gathered our documents, satisfaction evident in his efficient movements. "Clean victory, Leonard. Everything restored to your name, protective order in place. Couldn't have asked for a better outcome." I nodded, feeling hollow despite the win. There's a peculiar emptiness to vindication when it comes at the expense of family ties. Tom clapped my shoulder gently. "You did right by Eleanor today, Len. She'd be proud." Outside the courthouse, autumn sunlight gilded the town square. Maple trees blazed orange and red against the blue Indiana sky, the kind of perfect fall day Eleanor would have loved. Several of her bridge club ladies approached, offering congratulations and invitations for coffee that I accepted with genuine gratitude. These women had been part of our lives for decades. Their familiar faces were comforting anchors in my suddenly reconfigured world. As we descended the courthouse steps, I spotted Eric standing alone by his car, Rachel nowhere in sight. "I'll meet you at the truck," I told Tom, who nodded understanding. My son watched my approach with the wariness of someone expecting a blow. When I reached him, we stood in awkward silence until he finally spoke. "I guess you hate me now," he said, voice barely audible. I studied him. This man I'd once held as a newborn, taught to ride a bike, sent to college with pride swelling my chest. "I don't hate you, Eric. I just don't recognize you anymore." He winced. "Dad, Let me finish," I said quietly. "When your mother died, something broke between us. Maybe it was broken before and I just didn't see it. But I need you to understand something. What happened today wasn't about money or property. It was about dignity, about respect." Rachel didn't mean— "Yes, she did," I interrupted, my tone firm but not unkind. "And you let her. That's what hurts the most. You stood by while she dismantled my life piece by piece. You watched her treat me like a burden, a problem to be solved, rather than your father to be loved." Tears filled his eyes. "I was weak. I was wrong." "Yes," I agreed simply. "You were. Can you ever forgive me?" I looked toward the town square, where Eleanor and I had once pushed Eric on the swings, bought him ice cream cones, taught him to count the courthouse clock chimes. So many memories in this small town, some now tarnished, others still gleaming with truth. Forgiveness isn't something you earn with one apology, son. It's built back slowly, through actions, through changed behavior. If you want my forgiveness, you'll have to show me you deserve it. "And Rachel?" he asked hesitantly. "That's between you and her," I replied. "But I won't have her in my life again. That bridge is thoroughly burned." He nodded, eyes downcast. "What happens now?" "Now I rebuild. I go home, my real home, and I figure out what the rest of my life looks like." "Alone?" The word carried genuine concern. "Not alone," I corrected. "Without you and Rachel, yes, but not alone." We parted without embracing, without false promises or emotional declarations. Some wounds require time and distance before healing can begin. Tom drove me back to his apartment, where I changed out of my uniform and packed my few belongings. "You don't have to leave today," he offered. "The house has been empty for months. It'll need cleaning, the utilities turned back on." "Already arranged," I told him. "Whitney had the property management company prepare it yesterday, just in case." He grinned. Always the military man, prepared for all contingencies. "Eleanor's influence," I corrected. "She was the real strategist in our household." An hour later, Tom's truck turned onto Birchwood Lane. My heart quickened as we approached number 421, the modest two-story colonial with blue shutters that had been the center of my world for half a century. "Home sweet home," Tom murmured as we pulled into the driveway. The house looked smaller somehow, its paint slightly faded, Eleanor's hydrangeas overgrown in their beds. But it was mine, ours, still holding the echoes of our life together within its walls. Inside, the property managers had done their job well. The house was clean, utilities running, a few basic groceries stocked in the refrigerator. Most of the furniture was gone, sold by Eric and Rachel in their premature liquidation, but they'd left the essentials: my bed, the kitchen table, Eleanor's reading chair by the living room window. Tom helped me carry in my suitcases, then awkwardly declined my invitation to stay for dinner. "Got a transmission job waiting at the shop," he explained, "but I'll check on you tomorrow." Alone in the quiet house, I moved from room to room, reacquainting myself with spaces that held both comfort and loss. In our bedroom, my bedroom now, I opened the closet where the safe had been. The wall panel had been carelessly removed, exposing the empty safe like an open wound. I ran my fingers along its metal edge, remembering Eleanor's foresight, her protection reaching beyond death. "You saved me, Ellie," I whispered to the empty room. "Just like you always did." That first night home, I slept fitfully, waking often to unfamiliar shadows and the absence of household sounds I'd grown accustomed to. At Eric and Rachel's, the hum of their fancy refrigerator, the children's occasional midnight wanderings, the automated air system cycling on and off. Morning brought crisp autumn sunshine streaming through the kitchen windows, illuminating the worn Formica countertops Eleanor had always intended to replace. I made coffee in the old percolator they'd left behind, probably deemed too outdated to sell, and carried my mug out to the back porch. Our swing still hung from the oak tree, swaying slightly in the morning breeze. Eleanor's garden lay dormant, waiting for hands to bring it back to life. The shed where I'd taught Eric to build his first birdhouse stood weathered but solid at the yard's edge. So many memories in this small plot of land. So much life lived. My quiet reflection was interrupted by a tentative knock at the front door. Opening it, I found Maddie and Ben, my grandchildren, standing on the porch with uncertainly, a tall woman I didn't recognize waiting at the curb. "Grandpa," Maddie said, her 7-year-old formality making me smile. "We brought you a welcome home present." Ben thrust a lumpy package wrapped in Sunday comics toward me. "We made it," he announced, proudly. "Who's your friend?" I asked, nodding toward the woman by the car. "That's Ms. Perez, our babysitter," Maddie explained. "Mommy doesn't know we're here. Ms. Perez said it was the right thing to do." The woman gave a small wave, which I returned with genuine appreciation. I invited the children in, settling them at the kitchen table with glasses of water, the only beverage I currently had, to offer, while I carefully unwrapped their gift. Inside was a clay picture frame, clumsily painted with bright colors, holding a photo of the 4 of us from last Christmas, before everything fell apart. "It's so I won't be lonely," Ben explained solemnly. "It's perfect," I told them, my throat tight with emotion. "The very best welcome home gift." They stayed for half an hour, filling the house with chatter about school and friends and the new puppy their father had promised, but their mother kept delaying. When it was time to leave, they hugged me fiercely, extracting a promise that they could visit again soon. "Maybe when things aren't so mad anymore," Maddie said with disconcerting adult phrasing. After they left, I placed their handmade frame on the mantel, the first step in reclaiming this space as my own. Then I made a list. Furniture needed, groceries to buy, repairs to schedule, practical tasks to anchor my days while I figured out what came next. That afternoon, Eleanor's bridge club arrived unannounced, bearing casseroles, cleaning supplies, and determined expressions. "We've come to help," announced Judith Peterson, Eleanor's oldest friend, a formidable woman of 75 who still drove her Buick like a NASCAR competitor. "This house needs whipping into shape, and you need feeding up. You're thin as a rail, Leonard Carter." For the next several hours, these women, whom I'd known for decades but never truly appreciated, transformed my empty house with efficient energy. They scrubbed, dusted, hung curtains they'd salvaged from someone's attic, arranged flowers in Eleanor's favorite vases that one of them had borrowed from the church. By evening, the house felt lived in again. Not the same. It would never be the same without Eleanor, but alive in a way it hadn't been that morning. Over dinner at my rescued kitchen table, these women filled me in on months of town gossip, making me laugh for the first time since the court hearing. They spoke of Eleanor with easy familiarity, including her in conversations as though she might walk through the door at any moment. "She'd be pleased," Judith said as they prepared to leave. "Seeing you back where you belong." I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. "We'll be back tomorrow," she continued briskly. "Margaret's bringing her nephew's pickup to help collect the furniture she's been storing in her garage. Says it belonged to her mother, all good solid pieces from the 50s. Eleanor always admired that maple dresser." After they left, I sat on the porch swing, watching darkness settle over the neighborhood. Lights came on in windows, families gathered for dinner, children were called in from evening play, the rhythms of life continuing, unchanging, despite the seismic shifts in my own small world. For the first time since Eleanor's death, I felt something like peace. Not happiness, that would take longer to reclaim, but a quiet acceptance of what was, what had been lost, and what might still be possible. "I'm home, Ellie," I whispered to the evening star appearing above the maple trees, just like I promised. Days became weeks, and slowly, the house on Birchwood Lane transformed from an echo of the past into something new, still rooted in memory but growing toward a different future. Margaret's maple furniture brought warmth to rooms that had stood empty. Judith's sister, an avid gardener, helped me prune Eleanor's hydrangeas and plant bulbs that would sleep through winter before announcing spring with unexpected color. Tom visited, regularly, usually bearing some mechanical item he'd fixed up good as new. A lawnmower, a power drill, once even an old record player he'd found at a garage sale. Knowing my collection of vinyl albums had been one of the few possessions I'd managed to keep safe from Rachel's liquidation efforts. The routine of daily life became its own kind of healing, making my bed each morning with military precision, walking to Porter's grocery for fresh bread, reading the newspaper on the porch when weather permitted. Small, ordinary acts that gradually stitched together the torn fabric of my days. I heard nothing from Eric directly, though the grapevine of small-town gossip brought occasional updates. He and Rachel were having difficulties. He'd been seen consulting with a divorce attorney. She'd taken the children to visit her parents in Michigan for an extended stay. Each rumor reached me with the careful delivery of those who weren't sure how I'd receive such news, whether I'd feel vindication or sorrow. Truth be told, I felt both. No father wishes to see his son's marriage dissolve, yet I couldn't help feeling that Eric might find himself again if separated from Rachel's. Influence. As for my grandchildren, their absence was a persistent ache. The babysitter, Ms. Perez, had brought them to visit twice more before Rachel discovered the arrangement, and ended it with what I imagined was considerable fury. On a crisp November morning, as I raked leaves from the front yard, a familiar SUV pulled up to the curb. My hand stilled on the rake handle as Eric emerged, dressed in casual clothes rather than his usual business attire, his expression hesitant but determined. "Need a hand with those leaves?" he asked, the ordinary question carrying extraordinary weight. I studied him for a moment, then nodded. "There's another rake in the garage." We worked in silence for nearly half an hour, creating neat piles of red and gold maple leaves along the curb. The physical labor seemed to ease something in both of us, making space for words that might otherwise have stuck in our throats. "I've left Rachel," he finally said, leaning on his rake. "Filed for divorce last week." I continued raking, giving him space to continue. After the hearing, I couldn't see her the same way anymore. Couldn't unsee what she'd done, what I'd let her do. He drew a deep breath. I moved into an apartment near the elementary school. Rachel's furious, threatening to take the kids back to Michigan permanently. "Can she do that?" I asked, my first words since he'd arrived. He shook his head. "My lawyer says no. I've filed for joint custody. The hearing's next month." He hesitated. "I was hoping maybe you'd come. For support." I stopped raking and faced him. Directly. "As your father or as a character witness?" He flinched slightly. "Both, I guess. Though I don't deserve either." I considered his request, weighing the complex tangle of hurt, love, and responsibility that defined our relationship. "I'll be there," I finally said. "For the children's sake." Relief softened his features. "Thank you." We finished the yard work in more comfortable silence. Then I invited him in for coffee. He followed me into the kitchen, his eyes taking in the changes to the house. "It looks good," he said. "Different, but good." "Change was necessary," I replied, measuring coffee grounds into the percolator. "Some things shouldn't, stay the same." He nodded, understanding I wasn't just talking about furniture. We sat at the kitchen table, Eleanor's, table that Margaret had rescued from Rachel's garage sale, and began the slow, awkward work of rebuilding what had been broken. Not father and son as we had been, but two men finding a way forward through damaged trust and painful revelations. Before leaving, Eric paused at the door. "Dad, I know sorry isn't enough, but I am. And I'm going to prove it's real. Not with words, but with how I live. From here on." I believed him. Not fully. Not yet. Trust returns more slowly than it departs, but enough to leave the door open, literally and figuratively. The custody hearing in December went better than expected. Judge Martinelli, a no-nonsense woman with 20 years of family court experience, saw through Rachel's performance of maternal concern and granted Eric equal parenting time. When Rachel's attorney attempted to use my presence as evidence of undue influence, the judge dismissed it with visible irritation. "Lieutenant Commander Carter's presence speaks to family support, which you might recall is considered beneficial in custody determinations," she remarked dryly. "Unless you'd like to revisit the protective order Judge Ralston issued, which might prove less favorable to your client?" The attorney backed down immediately. After the hearing, Eric asked if I'd like to join him and the children for pizza. "It's my first weekend with them," he explained. "I thought we could start a new tradition." And so began our Friday night dinners. Sometimes at Eric's apartment, sometimes at my house, occasionally at the Brookside Pizza Parlor where Ben loved to watch the cooks toss dough in the air. These gatherings were initially strained, with the children confused by the family's reconfiguration and Eric still finding his footing as a single father. But gradually, they became the highlight of my week. Islands of connection in what had been a sea of solitude. Christmas approached with mixed emotions. Eleanor's absence would be keenly felt during the holidays she had. always orchestrated with joyful precision. For a while, I considered avoiding celebration altogether, perhaps volunteering at the Veterans Center in Indianapolis, where holidays were treated as just another day. Judith Peterson had other ideas. "You'll host Christmas dinner," she announced one afternoon in early December, arriving with a box of Eleanor's old decorations she'd somehow salvaged. "For Eric and the children, of course, but also for our little group. None of us has family nearby, and we're tired of the senior center's rubbery turkey." "I haven't cooked a holiday meal in 40 years, I protested. "That was Eleanor's department." Judith waved away my objection. "We'll all bring dishes. You just need to provide the house and some decent whiskey for Margaret's eggnog. That woman doesn't believe in measuring spirits." And so my first Christmas without Eleanor, but with a house full of people, was planned, not as a replacement for what was lost, but as an acknowledgement that life continues, adapts, finds new patterns. The week before Christmas, a heavy snow fell, transforming Brookside into a postcard-perfect winter scene. I was shoveling my driveway when Tom pulled up his truck bed filled with firewood. "Thought you might need this," he called, already unloading logs. "Forecast says we're in for a cold snap." As we stacked wood on the porch, Tom seemed uncharacteristically hesitant, starting sentences then abandoning them mid-thought. Finally, as we finished, he cleared his throat. "Got something to ask you, Len." "Ask away," I replied, brushing snow from my gloves. "My sister Martha, you remember her? Divorced about 10 years back, lives in Columbus. She's coming for Christmas, staying through New Year's." He shuffled his feet. "Wondering if you'd mind if I brought her to your dinner. Judith mentioned you were hosting." I smiled, suddenly understanding his nervousness. "You want to bring a date to Christmas dinner?" He reddened above his beard. "Not a date, exactly. Just, she's alone for the holidays, you're hosting dinner anyway." "Tom," I interrupted, "I'd be delighted to have Martha join us. And you can call it a date. I won't tell her if you don't." He grinned, relief evident. "You're a good man, Carter." "And you're a terrible liar, Jacobs," I replied. "But I appreciate the firewood all the same." That Christmas Eve, standing in my kitchen surrounded by the warm chaos of dinner preparations, I felt Eleanor's absence like a physical pain. The traditions she had maintained, the small touches that made our holidays special, all of it now my responsibility to continue or to reinvent. I excused myself and stepped onto the back porch, needing a moment alone with my grief. The night was clear and cold, stars brilliant above the snow-covered yard. I could almost hear Eleanor's voice. "Look up, Len. Even on the darkest nights, there's light if you know where to find it." "I miss you, Ellie," I whispered. "Especially today." "Grandpa?" Maddie's voice came softly from the doorway. "Are you okay?" I turned to find my granddaughter watching me with concern beyond her years. "Just talking to Grandma," I admitted. "Christmas was, her favorite." Maddie stepped onto the porch, slipping her small hand into mine. "Dad says she can still hear us, even though she's not here. He says she's in the stars now." I squeezed her hand gently. "Your dad might be right about that." "I think she'd be happy," Maddie continued seriously, "about the party and the people and how you fixed her flowers. She wouldn't want you to be sad alone." From the mouths of children, wisdom that adults struggle to grasp. "You're absolutely right," I told her. "Shall we go back inside and check on that pie you were helping with?" She nodded, tugging me toward the warm light of the kitchen. "I made it exactly how Grandma's recipe card says, with extra cinnamon because you like it that way." Christmas dinner was nothing like the perfectly orchestrated meals Eleanor had created, yet it held its own kind of beauty. Judith's turkey was slightly overcooked, Margaret's eggnog was scandalously strong, and Tom spent the entire meal trying not to appear nervous around his sister Martha, a lively woman with intelligent eyes and a laugh that filled the room. Eric arrived with the children, bearing awkwardly wrapped gifts and a store-bought cake he apologized for repeatedly. The Bridge Club ladies adopted Maddie immediately, teaching her card tricks and sharing stories about Eleanor that had the child giggling. Ben attached himself to Tom, fascinated by his stories of engines and machinery. As I looked around my dining room table, expanded with 2 card tables borrowed from neighbors to accommodate everyone, I felt a curious lightness. This gathering wasn't a replacement for what was lost, but something new growing from those deep roots. Different, unexpected, but no less valuable. Later, after the dishes were cleared and the children were playing with their new toys in the living room, Martha found me in the kitchen, rinsing coffee cups. "Leonard," she said directly, I want to thank you for including me today. Tom speaks very highly of you. The feeling's mutual, I assured her. Your brother's been my anchor these past months. She nodded. He told me what happened with your son and daughter-in-law. I went through something similar with my ex-husband. Not the same, but the betrayal part. That I understand. Her frankness was refreshing. Does it get easier? I asked. Not easier, she replied, thoughtfully. Just less central. It becomes part of your story, not the whole story. She smiled. Especially when you find new chapters to write. When everyone had gone except Eric and the children, who were spending the night in their old rooms upstairs, I sat alone by the Christmas tree, nursing a final glass of Margaret's potent eggnog. The house was quiet but not empty, filled with echoes of laughter, conversation, new memories layered gently over old ones. We're finding our way, Ellie, I murmured, raising my glass to the star atop the tree. It's not the same without you. It never will be. But we're finding our way. And in that moment, surrounded by the remains of a Christmas I'd never planned but somehow needed, I felt something unexpected unfurl in my chest. Not happiness exactly, but its quiet cousin, hope. January passed in a blur of winter storms and quiet evenings. I established new routines, Tuesday lunches with Tom and occasionally Martha, who'd extended her visit indefinitely. Thursday afternoons with Judith's bridge club, where they patiently taught me the game Eleanor had loved, and weekend visits with my grandchildren when they stayed with Eric. February brought unexpected news. Eric arrived one Sunday evening after returning the children to Rachel, his expression a mixture of apprehension and determination. I've been offered a job, he said, settling into Eleanor's reading chair. In Chicago. Better salary, more responsibility. I felt a cold weight settle in my stomach. Chicago's 3 hours away. He nodded. I know. That's why I wanted to discuss it with you before deciding. The custody arrangement would need renegotiating. Rachel would fight it, I observed. Actually, no. She's met someone. A pharmaceutical rep who travels constantly. She's been hinting that a more flexible arrangement might suit her. He hesitated. Which brings me to the second part of what I wanted to discuss. I waited, sensing whatever came. Next would significantly alter our carefully reconstructed relationship. If I take this job, I'd like the kids to stay with you during my custody weeks, at least until I'm settled. I'd come back every weekend, of course, but they'd need someone during the week. Their school is here, their friends. He took a deep breath. It's a lot to ask, I know. It was indeed a lot. A seismic shift in responsibilities I hadn't anticipated. At 72, I'd imagined my grandparenting role would involve occasional babysitting and Sunday dinners, not weekday school runs and homework supervision. You don't have to answer now, Eric added quickly. Think about it. Talk to Tom and Judith if you want. I need this fresh start, Dad, but not at the expense of the kids' stability or your freedom. I studied my son's face, seeing in it echoes of the determined boy who'd insisted on rebuilding his bicycle alone after a crash, the teenager who'd worked double shifts to buy his first car, the young man who'd once had ambitions beyond Rachel's carefully managed life plan. When would you start? I asked. April 1st, about 6 weeks from now. I nodded slowly. Let me think about it. After he left, I walked through the house, considering what such a change would mean. The spare bedroom would need proper furniture, not just the daybed currently occupying it. The study would need to become a space for homework and children's projects. My peaceful mornings of coffee and crosswords would give way to the chaos of school preparations. At the same time, a different vision formed. Bicycle rides to the park, bedtime stories in the room that had once been their father's, teaching Maddie to tend Eleanor's garden when spring arrived. The next morning, I called Tom and asked if he'd help me move some furniture. Martha knows a consignment shop in Columbus with good children's bedroom sets, he told me. She offered to drive us over this weekend if you're interested. By the time Eric returned for my answer the following Friday, the spare bedroom had been transformed with twin beds sporting space-themed comforters for Ben and butterfly patterns for Maddie. A desk beneath the window held new school supplies, and bookshelves displayed childhood favorites salvaged from the attic. Eric stood in the doorway, momentarily speechless. You've been busy, he finally managed. Judith helped with the curtains, I explained, oddly embarrassed by my enthusiasm. And Martha, Tom's sister, found most of the furniture. So this means yes, I confirmed. With conditions. You'll need to be here every weekend, no exceptions. And we'll revisit the arrangement in 3 months to make sure it's working for everyone. Especially the children. He embraced me. Then, the first real hug we'd shared since before Eleanor's death. "Thank you," he whispered, "for giving me a second chance." "Third," I corrected gently. But who's counting? March arrived with its changeable moods. Snow one day, sunshine the next, the first tentative crocuses pushing through thawing ground. Rachel, surprisingly, raised no objections to the new arrangement. Perhaps her new relationship had softened her sharp edges, or perhaps she simply calculated that fighting would cost more than cooperating. Either way, by month's end, the custody modification was approved, and Eric prepared for his move to Chicago. The children's first extended stay coincided with spring break in early April. I'd anticipated challenges: homesickness, adjustment difficulties, the inevitable comparisons to life with their parents. What I hadn't expected was how naturally they settled into the rhythms of the house, as though they'd always belonged here. Ben claimed the tree swing as his personal domain, insisting on daily pushing competitions that left us both breathless with exertion and laughter. Maddie discovered Eleanor's collection of bird identification books and appointed herself official backyard ornithologist, keeping meticulous records of visitors to the new feeder Tom had installed. We established routines: breakfast at 7:30, lunches packed assembly line style, homework before television, Friday night pizza with their father when he returned from Chicago. The first week of school brought minor crises: a forgotten math worksheet, a playground disagreement, but nothing we couldn't navigate together. "You're good at this, Grandpa," Maddie observed one evening as I helped her with fractions. "Better than Dad. He gets all frustrated." "I've had more practice being patient," I told her. "It comes with age." "Like wisdom?" she asked seriously. "Sometimes, if you're paying attention." The week before Easter, Martha invited us to join her and Tom for dinner at her newly rented apartment in Brookside. The children were initially skeptical. "Is this a date, Grandpa?" Ben asked with characteristic bluntness, but were won over by Martha's collection of vintage board games and Tom's promise to help Ben build a model rocket. Watching them interact, Tom's gruff affection, Martha's gentle humor, my grandchildren's eager acceptance of these new people in their lives, I felt a curious sense of rightness, as though puzzle pieces long scattered were finally finding their proper places. Later, after the children were settled in the spare bedroom Martha had prepared, she joined me on her small balcony overlooking Brookside's town square. "They're wonderful kids," she said, handing me a cup of coffee. "You've done an amazing job with them these past weeks." "They make it easy," I replied. "Most of the time." She smiled. "Tom tells me you've never had this much responsibility for them before." Rachel preferred professional childcare, said I was too old-fashioned in my approaches. Martha's laugh was warm in the cool evening air. "Well, your old-fashioned approaches seem to be working beautifully. Those children are thriving." We stood in comfortable silence, watching lights come on across the square as dusk deepened. "Tom's asked me to stay in Brookside permanently," she said after a while. "Says there's nothing for me in Columbus anymore." "Is he right?" She considered the question. "My job can be done remotely. My friends have mostly scattered to retirement communities in Florida. My ex-husband remarried years ago." She turned to face me directly. "But those are all reasons to leave Columbus, not reasons to stay here." "And do you have reasons to stay here?" I asked, suddenly very interested in her answer. Her smile held a hint of mischief. "I'm developing a few. Your grandchildren, for one. I've grown quite fond of them. Judith's bridge club has invited me to join their Thursday games. And then there's this rather interesting man I've been getting to know." "Tom's a good man," I said automatically. She laughed outright. "Leonard Carter. I wasn't talking about my brother." The implication hung between us. Unexpected, yet somehow not surprising. In the months since Eleanor's death, I'd navigated grief, betrayal, legal battles, and family reconstruction. The possibility of romantic connection hadn't entered my consciousness until this moment, with this forthright woman whose intelligence and warmth had gradually become important to me. "Oh," I said inadequately. Martha's expression softened. "Don't look so alarmed, Leonard. I'm not proposing marriage, just suggesting that perhaps, when you're ready, if you're ever ready, there might be possibilities neither of us anticipated." Before I could formulate a response, Ben's voice called from inside. "Grandpa, I can't find my toothbrush." Martha touched my arm lightly. "Go handle the crisis. We have time for the rest of this conversation later." That night, lying in Martha's guest room with Ben snoring softly from the cot beside me, I found myself wondering what Eleanor would think of these developments, of me raising our grandchildren, part-time, of Martha's gentle suggestion of possibilities. Is this okay, Ellie? I whispered into the darkness. Am I allowed to build something new? No answer came, of course, yet I felt a strange certainty that Eleanor, practical, loving Eleanor who had protected my future even as she faced her end, would approve of this unexpected path forward. When Eric arrived from Chicago the next day to collect the children, he noticed something different immediately. You look good, Dad, he observed as we watched the kids showing him Martha's collection of board games. More relaxed somehow. Do I? I smiled. Must be all that youthful energy keeping me on my toes. He shook his head. It's more than that. You seem, I don't know, hopeful? The word caught me by surprise, yet I recognized its truth. Despite all that had happened, the losses, the betrayals, the reconstructions, hope had indeed taken root again, sending up tender shoots like Eleanor's perennials emerging from winter ground. Maybe I am, I acknowledged. It's been a long road back. Eric's expression grew serious. I'm sorry I made that road harder. You're helping smooth it now, I told him. That's what matters. As spring progressed into early summer, our arrangement solidified into something that worked for everyone. Eric drove down from Chicago every Friday afternoon, staying in his old room for the weekend. Rachel's initial cooperation evolved into genuine flexibility as her relationship with the pharmaceutical representative became more serious. The children settled into the rhythm of two households, their father's Chicago apartment every other weekend, their mother's house for her custody weeks, and my home as their weekday anchor when they were with Eric. Maddie and Ben thrived under this arrangement, their initial confusion giving way to acceptance of this expanded definition of family. They adopted Tom as an honorary uncle, delighting in his mechanical projects and fishing expeditions. Martha became a special friend who taught Maddie to bake Eleanor's recipes and introduced Ben to chess. And I, the man who had once been discarded as useless, whose pension had been deemed not even enough for dog food, found myself at the center of a vibrant new family configuration, needed and valued in ways I'd never anticipated. 1 year to the day after the courtroom confrontation that had restored my legal rights but shattered my family, I stood in Eleanor's garden, my garden now, deadheading spent blooms and reflecting on the journey since that decisive morning. The hydrangeas had bloomed spectacularly this summer, their blue heads nodding in approval at the changes around them. Maddie's vegetable patch flourished in one corner, Ben's rocket launch area occupied another, and the old maple tree still supported the swing where 3 generations of Carters had soared toward the sky. Inside, Martha was helping the children bake a cake for tonight's celebration. 1 year in our reconstituted household, 3 months since her official move to Brookside, and 6 weeks since our first tentative date at Angelo's Italian restaurant, where we'd both ordered spaghetti and laughed about the cliché. Tom arrived first for the evening gathering, bearing a bottle of decent scotch and news about the auto repair shop he was considering purchasing, now that its owner was retiring. Could use a business partner with a head for numbers, he mentioned casually. If you're looking for something to keep you busy when the kids are at school this fall. Raised an eyebrow. Are you offering me a job, Jacobs? More like a project, he corrected. Something worthy of that strategic mind the Navy trained. The mechanical stuff I can handle, but the business side, he shrugged, never was my strong suit. Before I could respond, Judith's Buick pulled into the driveway, followed closely by Eric's car. Within minutes, the quiet house transformed into a hub of conversation, laughter, and the organized chaos I'd come to cherish. After dinner, as Martha served coffee and the cake the children had decorated with enthusiastic, if uneven frosting, Eric cleared his throat. I have an announcement, he said, looking nervous but determined. I've been offered a permanent position at the Brookside branch of my company. I'll be moving back next month. Maddie and Ben erupted with excitement, peppering him with questions about where he would live and whether this meant changes to our arrangement. I found an apartment 3 blocks from here, he told them. And no, nothing changes unless you want it to. You can still stay with Grandpa during my weeks if that's what you prefer. Ben looked at me anxiously. We can still live with you, right? Grandpa? This is your home for as long as you want it to be, I assured him. But having your dad closer means more flexibility for everyone. Later, after the children were in bed and our guests had departed, Martha and I sat on the porch swing, enjoying the fireflies rising from the lawn like earthbound stars. You've created something remarkable here, Leonard, she said, her hand comfortable. in mine. A year ago, you were alone in Tom's spare room, fighting for what was rightfully yours. Now look at all this. She gestured toward the house where my grandchildren slept, where my son had found his way back, where she and I were cautiously building something neither of us had expected. I had help, I acknowledged. From Eleanor, from Tom, from you. She squeezed my hand. From yourself, most of all. You could have chosen bitterness after what they did to you. No one would have blamed you. I considered her words, thinking back to those dark days after being expelled from Eric and Rachel's home, the humiliation of being treated as worthless, the temptation to respond with equal cruelty when the opportunity arose. Bitterness would have poisoned whatever came after, I said. Finally. Eleanor always said that how you respond to wrongdoing defines you more than the wrong itself. Wise woman, Martha murmured. I wish I'd known her. She would have liked you, I told her, certain of this truth. She valued straightforwardness and people who stand their ground. We sat in comfortable silence, the swing's gentle motion matching the rhythm of the evening. Inside the house, my grandson's nightlight cast star patterns on his bedroom ceiling. My granddaughter's collection of pine cones and interesting rocks lined the windowsill of what had once been Eric's childhood room. On the mantel, Eleanor's photograph stood alongside new images. The children at the lake last month, Tom and Martha at the 4th of July parade, Eric receiving his promotion certificate. The past and present intertwined, neither diminishing the other. The final piece of resolution came in September, as crimson tinged the maple leaves and morning fog hung over the garden. Rachel arrived unexpectedly one Saturday morning, her designer clothes replaced by casual jeans, her perfect makeup subdued. I thought we should talk, she said when I answered the door, without lawyers or judges or audiences. I invited her in, offering coffee more from habit than hospitality. She declined, perching on the edge of the sofa as though prepared for quick departure. I'm getting married, she announced without preamble. David, the pharmaceutical rep, has accepted a position in California. We'll be moving next month. The implications were immediate. And the children? She met my gaze. Directly. Something she hadn't done since before the courtroom confrontation. That's what I want to discuss. David travels constantly. The position is demanding. The children would be with nannies most of the time. She took a deep breath. I'd like to modify the custody arrangement. Give Eric primary custody, with generous visitation for me during school breaks. I studied her carefully, looking for the calculation or manipulation that had characterized our previous interactions. Instead, I saw something unexpected. Resignation mixed with a species of clarity. Eric moved back to Brookside for them, I pointed out. I know, and they're thriving here. With him, with you. She gestured around the living room, at the homework charts on the refrigerator visible through the doorway, the soccer cleats by the back door, the half-completed puzzle on the coffee table. This is their home now. I'd be selfish to uproot them for my convenience. The admission, so contrary to the Rachel I'd known, left me momentarily speechless. She filled the silence, words coming faster now. I'm not going to pretend I've had some dramatic personality transformation, Leonard. I still think you were stubborn and difficult about the house and assets. But, she hesitated, I've realized some things this past year. About what I want, about what kind of mother I am, and am not. The children need you in their lives, I said, surprising myself with the sincerity behind the words. They'll have me. Summer vacations, holidays, video calls, but their day-to-day lives are better here. She stood, smoothing her jeans with hands that trembled slightly. I've already spoken to Eric. He agrees this is best for now, though we'll reassess as they get older. I walked her to the door. This woman who had once plotted to discard me, who had called my pension worthless, who had nearly destroyed what I valued most. In the clear fall light, she looked younger somehow, unburdened by the constant calculation that had characterized her presence in our family. At the threshold she paused. I never apologized to you, did I, for how things happened? No, I agreed. You didn't. She nodded, accepting this truth. I'm not sure an apology would mean much now anyway, but for what it's worth, I was wrong about you. About a lot of things. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was perhaps as close as Rachel could come. And in that moment, I found that it was enough. Not to erase what had happened, but to close that chapter with something approaching peace. Safe travels, Rachel, I said simply. The children will miss you. After she left, I walked through the house that had been the center of so much conflict. now transformed into a sanctuary of second chances. In the kitchen, Ben's science project occupied half the table. In the study, Maddie's book report draft waited for proofreading. In the spare room, Martha had left her gardening books stacked neatly beside the guest bed she rarely used anymore, having gradually migrated to the master bedroom over the summer. In the evening, when everyone gathered for dinner, Eric from his new apartment, the children from their Saturday activities, Martha from her volunteer shift at the library, Tom from the garage he now co-owned with my investment and administrative support, I looked around the table and marveled at how completely my world had reconstructed itself from the ashes of last year's devastation. "What are you thinking about, Grandpa?" Maddie asked, noticing my contemplative expression. "You look far away." "Not far away," I corrected gently. "Just appreciating the view from here." Later, after dishes were cleared and the children were engaged in a fierce Monopoly battle with their father and Tom, Martha joined me on the back porch. The evening air carried the scent of approaching autumn. Rich earth, ripening apples, the distant smoke of leaf burning. "Penny for your thoughts," she said, wrapping a cardigan around her shoulders against the cooling air. I considered the question, trying to distill the complex emotions of the day into something coherent. "I was thinking about justice," I finally said, "about how it arrives in unexpected ways." She nodded, understanding as she so often did. "Not through the courtroom victory, but through all of this." She gestured toward the warm light spilling. From the windows, the sounds of family engagement within. "Exactly. A year ago, I wanted vindication. To prove Rachel wrong. To make Eric see his mistake. To reclaim what was taken from me." "And you got all that?" she reminded me. "Yes, but it wasn't what mattered in the end." I took her hand, its warmth anchoring me to this present moment. What mattered was finding my way back to myself, to being needed, valued, part of something larger than my own grievances. Martha leaned against my shoulder, her presence a comfort I'd never expected to find again after Eleanor. From discarded to central, from burden to foundation, from ending to beginning, I added softly. Inside, Ben's triumphant shout announced a Monopoly victory. Maddie's indignant response floated through the open window, followed by Eric's mediating tones and Tom's rumbling laughter. Ordinary moments of a reconstructed life. Eleanor had protected me legally through her foresight, securing my material future through updated wills and hidden documentation. But the true protection, the real inheritance, had been in the foundation she and I built together over decades. The capacity for resilience, for forgiveness, for beginning again when all seemed lost. My pension hadn't changed. It was still the same modest military retirement that Rachel had once deemed worthless. The house was still the same modest colonial that she'd been eager to sell. I was still the same man she'd dismissed as obsolete and burdensome. And yet everything had transformed. Not through revenge or retaliation, but through the quiet dignity of living well, of refusing to be diminished by others' assessment of my worth, of remaining open to unexpected possibilities. "Ready to go in?" Martha asked as the evening chill deepened. I looked once more at the garden where Eleanor's hydrangeas had bloomed and faded, where next spring's bulbs already waited beneath the soil, where life continued its eternal cycle of ending and beginning. "Yes," I said, rising and offering her my hand. "I'm ready." In the doorway, I paused, looking back at the yard now silvered with moonlight. "The worst moments of our lives don't define us unless we let them," Eleanor used to say. "It's what we build afterward that matters." And we had built something beautiful from the ruins, something Eleanor would have recognized as worthy, as enduring, as true. "The truth always emerges," I whispered to the night air. "And sometimes, when you're very lucky, it brings with it a second chance at joy." Martha squeezed my hand in silent understanding, and together we stepped back into the light of home.